Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good day. My name is Muhammad Izwan bin Abu Bakar and I will be explaining on about the facts of the murder that took place in the movie 12 Angry Men. In the movie, a man was found dead, murdered with a supposed distinctive switchblade with a stabbing wound that was angled downward. A woman who lived on the next building to the deceased and his son claimed to have seen the deceased being stabbed by his own son through her window of her house, vicariously through the window of a passing elevated train. A second neighbor who lived below the deceased family, a rather sickly old man, testified that he had heard the son threaten, saying, "I want to kill you," to the deceased before hearing the sound of a body dropping to the floor. Upon hearing the aforementioned, the elderly man said that he took exactly 15 seconds hurrying to his door before he saw the son running down the stairs. And the son had also recently purchased a similar switchblade that was found at the crime scene, but claimed that his was lost that night. And after supposedly killing his father, the deceased, the boy claimed that he went to watch a movie at midnight, in which he failed to recall all of the specific details of the movie that he watched, such as what was the movie's name and who the actor was. That's all.
Hello, good afternoon to Dr. Zainal. My name is Nur Hanum binti Muhammad Zaki. My matrix number is 21558. Okay, as for me, I'll be explaining on one of the key piece evidence in the film of Angrymen 1957 that are relevant to the common law and the evidence X 1950. One of the key piece evidence is the testimony of the eyewitness, which is the old man who lived in the same building as the victim. In this film, it cannot be denied that the old man testimony statement includes both direct and circumstantial evidence. Okay, as for direct evidence, I'll be explaining here. In general, oral evidence refers to a testimony given by a witness in court or in any other legal proceeding that is presented orally, rather than in writing. The rules of evidence, such as the ones outlined in Evidence Act 1950, which establish the standard of types of testimony that can be presented in court and how it can be used as evidence in particular cases. We refer to the Evidence Act 1950 under Section 60. It has been stated that evidence must be direct, meaning, in terms of oral evidence, it must be direct, meaning that it must be first-hand testimony observed by the witness himself personally, who are in question. This means that if a witness testifying about something they saw, they must have actually seen it themselves. And if they're testifying about something that they heard, they must have actually heard it themselves, which they must have actually experienced or observed it by their own senses. We can refer in the case of Rica-Leva Design Settle Steel St. Bernhard versus Vista Access, where in this case it has been highlighted that oral evidence must be direct. In example, the testimony must be of the person who perceived the fact through the medium of his own senses. Similarly, in the case of common law involving United States versus Curry, the court also hold that direct evidence is a testimony of the person who claimed to have a personal knowledge of the commission of the crime which has been charged, such as eyewitness. How can we relate these common laws, cases, and the statute of which is the Evidence Act 1950 with the case of with the testimony of the old man in the film of 12 Angry Men 1957? As for in the film of 12 Angry Men, the eyewitness testimony of the old man, which is the old man who lived in the second floor under the room where the murder took place, claimed that he heard loud noises and then heard, "I'm going to kill you," in the upstairs apartment. A second later, he heard that a body falling at that time of the crime which is a crucial from upstairs of his apartment. And this is a crucial evidence in this testimony and relevant to the Evidence Act 1950 and the common law principles, which I mentioned earlier, which the oral evidence is something that you observe and you personally perceive it with your own senses. Hence, the testimony of the eyewitness in this film is one of the direct piece evidence that link the defendant to the crime, and it's a central prosecution case against him. In addition, testimony of an eyewitness in this film is generally considered to be direct evidence as it based on a first-hand observation by the witness, as per I mentioned earlier, under Section 60 of the Evidence Act 1950. Not to mention the direct evidence is evidence that goes directly. This evidence is the evidence that goes directly to the issues in question regarding the murder case and is based on the witness' own knowledge, which is the old man, and his personal experience when he walk out that his apartment door and see a body falling from a staircases. Therefore, it is in general considered to be more reliable and persuasive to the circumstantial evidence, which is evidence that require the jurors in this film to draw inference or make assumption in order to connect.
Hello, my name is Kodesh Sundaraju, metric number 273805. I'll be explaining on the circumstantial evidence that is involved in this film. Indirect evidence is known as circumstantial evidence, and it refers to any type of evidence that does not directly establish a fact in question, but rather leads to a reasonable conclusion that the fact does exist. In order to provide support for a claim using circumstantial evidence, further reasonable inferences need to be drawn from the available information. When we consider Malaysian law, we find that the principle of res gestae was included in Section 6 of the Evidence Act 1950, which expressly states that any facts will be considered as relevant if they are connected with the facts in issue in such a way that they form part of the same transaction. Illustration A of Section 6 paints a clear picture of the situation in which the words and action of the accused so shortly before or after the death of the deceased will form part of the components of the principal fact. This can happen either before or after the death of the deceased person. We can refer to the case of Pendakwa Raya against Muhammad Zahari bin Ambong, when the learned judges accepted the admission of the remark said by the accused in line with the Section 6 of the Evidence Act, because they were contemporaneous and pertinent with the. In this situation, the old man's testimony would be admissible as circumstantial evidence since he witnessed the suspect fleeing from the scene through the stairwell after the door was opened. As being so, even if the elderly man did not really see the murder scene, some of the jurors may conclude that the accused committed the murder based on the witness's testimony because they find it to be compelling circumstantial evidence of the defendant's guilt. It was obvious that the old man's witness statement should be admissible in court by referring to the principle of res gestae under Section 6 of the Evidence Act 1950, as it described the entirety of the events which occurred within a very short period of time around the deceased's death, and this evidence was intimately associated to the murder event. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Angrymen and my metric number is 268219. So one key evidence that can be observed in the movie is the supposed knife used by the accused to commit the murder. The weapon supposedly used to murder the deceased father was said to be a knife that was unique and distinct in its design and cannot be found anywhere else. It is regarded as circumstantial evidence on the ground that during the material time of the crime, the accused somehow managed to lose the knife, on which the police later found. The common law case that can be linked to the relevancy of evidence is in the case of Turner versus R. In this case, the appellant was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. He has appealed against his conviction on the ground that the judge refused to admit evidence which a psychiatrist was prepared to give in support of his defense of provocation. He has asked this court to receive the evidence. The judge questioned whether the evidence of a psychiatrist was admissible and relevant on these matters. There was some discussion at the end, which the judge said he wanted to see the evidence which the psychiatrist proposed to give. And the court held that an expert's opinion is admissible to furnish the court with scientific information which is likely to be outside the experience and knowledge of a judge or jury. If on the proven facts, a judge or jury can form their own conclusions without help, then the opinion of an expert is unnecessary. And from this case, it can be seen that it is the duty of the judge to admit evidence that is relevant which was presented in the proceeding. And the court may admit the evidence after it was proved and declared that the evidences are related to the facts of issue. And this is consistent with what Section 5 of Evidence Act 1950 says about the relevant.
Good day, sir. I'm Hoyong with matrix number 273410. Now, I would like to continue with our group presentations on the key evidence of the switchblade knife based on the Malaysian Evidence Act 1950. Putting it into the local perspective in the case of Sunny Am versus Public Prosecutor, the appellant was charged and convicted of murder of his girlfriend. The facts advanced by the prosecution side were so convincing that the court was inevitably led to conclude that the appellant was the murderer. In this case, heavy reliance was made by the learned judge in conjunction with Section 8 of the Evidence Act, which demonstrate the doctrines of res gestae in the proceedings. Section 8 branched out over three principal facts of motive, preparations, and conduct, where the first parts act upon the relevancy of motive and preparations, while the relevancy of conduct is pursued under the second part of this section. As distinguished from the intentions of a person which emphasize on the decision whether to conduct a particular act, motive is the reason behind that lead a person to commit a particular crime, and in the case of Sunny Ang, the appellant was made bankrupt and was in need of money. Preparation is the preliminary act which lead to the discharge of offence. In this case, the appellant allowed his girlfriend to go down into the water near Pulau Dua, which would not safe for her to dive alone. In addition, conduct refers to the act of a crime being discharged. In this regard, it is notably that the previous and subsequent conduct on behalf of the accused may be relevant and may be taken into account by the court from a proper perspective. After the disappearance of his girlfriend, the appellant has made formal claim on 3 insurance policy covering her against accident. In 12 Angrymen, it was an agreed fact that the accused has run out of the house angrily and went directly to a local junk shop where he brought the switchblade knife, which was identified as the murder weapon. With regards to the relevancy of the knife, it was clear as to the motive of the accused in committing the murder case, since there was an argument between the deceased and the accused at around 8 p.m. on the night of killing, and the deceased has punched the accused twice in his face. It was pertinent to spotlight that the accused was angry at the time of leaving the house, and hence it showed a positive motive for the accused to kill his father. Viewed from another standpoint, it was necessary to prove that certain preparation have been done by the accused, which in this movie refer to the actions of the accused in purchasing the switchblade knife to commit the murder. In addition, the subsequent conduct of the accused in running away from the building after the sound of a body hitting the floor make it apparent that the evidence of switchblade knife should be given way before the court. In this regard, it was an undeniable truth that the uniqueness of the knife and the fact that it was found in the chest of the deceased would directly or at least raise the possibility that the weapon bought by the accused has been used by him to commit the crime. It was also notably that even though the accused claimed that he had lost the possessions of the murder weapon on his way to the cinema, circumstantial evidence may be drawn in which the accused would be responsible for the murder in this instance through the reappearing